The film I covered was What's Eating Gilbert Grape. For synopsis, What's Eating Gilbert Grape covers the Grape family through the eyes of Gilbert Grape, mostly. He's the main protagonist. Gilbert has a brother. His name is Arnie. He's my main focus for today. He is a Caucasian male, age 17. They live in a small town with a single mother. She has obesity and depression, which came shortly after their father committed suicide. And Arnie lives with his three siblings, including Gilbert. He's closest to Gilbert, who is his main caretaker. They are seen throughout the film together almost 90% of the time. Arnie constantly is shown partaking in dangerous activities, which kind of show where this goes, and Gilbert is seen getting him down from these. He's seen hanging from trees, going up on water tower, which these activities are seen as negative with the people in the town. In fact, he gets arrested for climbing the water tower at one point, which brings his whole family to the town. The whole film's goal is to lead up to Arnie turning 18 and getting him a special 18th birthday party, and the stressors that the family faces around it. So the disorder that Arnie is seen to have is autism spectrum disorder, which is defined as a neurodevelopmental disorder that involves a wide range of problematic disorders, which normally deal with social communications. When it comes to DSM-5, the first symptom is a deficit in social communication and interaction. So, in regards to nonverbal communicative behaviors, we see Arnie smack his own head when he gets frustrated or upset, which is not necessary and is almost over-exaggerated in regards to many of the actions that he leads up to this. He also lacks eye contact when speaking to others within the film. In fact, I don't think he ever makes direct eye contact with anyone when speaking to them, which kind of shows these more nonverbal communicatives. Then there's a difficulty developing and maintaining relationships. In regards to Arnie, when we see him playing, kind of just engaging with other people, he wants to do what he wants and not take into account the other people he's with. An example of this is when he's playing with Becky, who is Gilbert's love interest in the film. He tells her to ask where Arnie is, so that he can partake in the fun of hiding from her and then being found. Then there are deficits in socio-emotional reciprocity and initiating social interactions. Now, this is in red because I don't think Arnie really fills into this category within the symptoms, because we see him engaging in conversation and saying hey, hi to everyone in the town. Then you have restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. So in regards to repetitive motor movements or speech, he repeats everything people say to him or around him. One of the main ones that remain in my memory is when he climbs the water tower, Gilbert will say, "Match in the gas tank, boom, boom," causing Arnie to repeat this, and it kind of calms him down to the point where he comes back down off the water tower. But he also is seen at the dinner table just repeating simple phrases that his family is saying to him. And when it comes to insistence and sameness patterns and routines, we don't really see a lot of this. In fact, there's only really one instance we see, and it comes at the beginning when Gilbert's kind of explaining that watching the RVs come into their town is a yearly ritual for him and Arnie. Being highly fixated on certain interests that are abnormal to, I'd say, the normal person. We see this in Arnie cares for his crickets in a jar. He's seen with these crickets in many different parts of the film. And in the beginning, we see him kill one of them, and immediately regrets it because these are what he's supposed to care for, and he feels closeness to them that's abnormal. In regards to symptoms being present in early development, we don't get a direct view of this, but again, in the beginning, Gilbert mentions that doctors said that he wouldn't make it past 10, meaning that these symptoms for him were present before the age of 10, so early on. The symptoms cause clinically significant impairment. We see this when he's not capable of taking care of himself. So Gilbert leaves him to clean himself in the bath, and he's unable to understand how to wash himself or even get himself out of the bathtub and into a towel, showing that he doesn't have these basic skills. Also, symptoms that are not better explained by IQ disability. This kind of goes back into the if it's presented in early development, because he doesn't really have a diagnosis within the film. This is early in the 90s, and getting a diagnosis for autism was rare. So we don't really actually know if he has any other diagnoses of disabilities. In accordance with conceptualization, males are more often diagnosed with autism spectrum, and Arnie is a male, so he falls into this category. He also falls into the category of symptoms often being shown around the age of 2. Now, it's not specifically mentioned, as I've said, but it's kind of insinuated that he had these symptoms when he was fairly young. And then the textbook talks about evidence to show a heritable component to the cause of autism spectrum disorder, but I don't see this within the Grapes. Nobody else in his family kind of shows symptoms of autism spectrum disorder in any capacity. In regards to prognosis, he's not formally diagnosed, and this can be due to the fact that he lives in a small town with a lack of resources, and the fact that it's early in the 90s, like I mentioned, and getting a diagnosis like ASD was really rare. Arnie is also not the only one in his family who has a mental illness. We've seen his mother and father both have depression, and Gilbert is kind of not diagnosed with a mental illness, but trying to find himself. So, being able to fully support Arnie to the level that he needs with his disorder is likely not going to happen, meaning that he's going to stay in the form that he is now. In regards to social inequality within prognosis, if he lived in a bigger city than the smaller town that he lives in, he would face more strangers who don't understand his behaviors. So by living in a small town, he's advantaged with the fact that these people know him and understand that the behaviors that he partakes in aren't crazy or insane. I also kind of covered that a change in racial background. So Arnie is a Caucasian male, but if he were to change races, people might be less accepting of his actions, and people may be less willing and able to care for him or see him partaking in these behaviors and take further action, like he may be arrested more often. With treatment, the textbook kind of covers the fact that treatment prognosis for ASD is insufficient. There's no actual official treatment for people with this disorder because there's no effective way to treat it. Just generally, in regards to Arnie, I think that it would be good for him to engage in intensive behavioral intervention, which is basically he goes and he would talk to a therapist, and they would work on social interaction and things that would help him fit into the norms of society. I think it'd be good to include Gilbert in this process to support these interactions in a real world setting. So he goes to his intervention, learns how to help him in his daily life. There's no direct causation for ASD either. So there's no good treatment and there's no causation. This kind of gives a lack of an official diagnosis for Arnie in general. so he's just labeled as mentally disabled, which in this time was seen as he's gonna die soon. He's not gonna last very long. But with the care of his brothers and sisters, he's surviving. Um, One of the underdeveloped characteristics in the film is the people on with autism spectrum disorder need and desire for routines in their daily life. They touch basis on this, but really they let Arnie do whatever he wants. But I think that they could have touched basis on this more effectively. Overall, though, I think the presentation is outstandingly believable for this disorder. Arnie shows the above necessary symptoms to diagnose someone with autism spectrum disorder. So it wouldn't be really a question of if he has it. It'd just be a question is when he would get diagnosed. This being said, I think even if somebody didn't have a complete understanding of autism spectrum disorder, the audience can see that his disorder shows large deficits in social communication and repetition. And if they were to look up any of these symptoms that he has, it would automatically lead him to autism spectrum disorder. And I think the film did a really good job of covering all of these symptomologies. I also think that the film both enhances empathy for people with disorder while also contributing to the stigma around it. In the film, people are shown getting mentally and physically punishing Arnie when they are frustrated with his behaviors. And these are behaviors that he can't help because they're due to his disorder. So it kind of makes people feel empathy for him, wishing that they could help eliminate the stigma that he can control these behaviors. My recommendations is that although this film covers many symptoms of autism, there are some really important factors left out. Like I mentioned, there's not much of an emphasis towards routines. And people with ASD often rely heavily on routines, and Arnie's just kind of seen doing whatever he likes. There's also not as much of an emphasis towards the nonverbal side of autism, because even those seen with able to have speech choose not to, and they kind of shelter themselves more, and Arnie's kind of shown more as a social butterfly. And I think it would be better to include the opposite side of that as well. That's it.